All right, well, meeting over at 6:30. First up on the agenda is roll call.
Steve Rule here, Lou Savage,
Here.
Sean Fitzgerald,
Here.
Chairman Ryan Jones,
Here.
Dan King.
Here.
Took the easy way out.
Next up, we have approval of October 10th, 2020 meeting minutes. We get a chance to look at them. Second. Move the second. All those in favor say aye. Both same sign. Carries. Comments from citizens. This is the time for anyone to address the planning commission on matters that are not on the agenda. But everything that's not on the agenda. Going through your business. Exhibit A, public hearing, land use file number 2205-01 SDR, site design review of a two-story mixed-use building behind the existing earthenwood art gallery at 412 South Trade Street. First floor will contain a woodworking and ceramic studio and kiln. Second floor will contain one residential dwelling. I assume we go to Holly on that.
Yeah, she's here and wants to show herself. There you go. Okay, over to you, Holly.
Hi there. Does our chair have a copy of the script for the public hearing?
Should have one in front of you.
Yeah, got it.
Yep. This is you and this is the you and Holly show. So,
Okay.
And
So I have to read that along.
I think so. He has to read this, right, Holly?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is that?
This is the script you sent out. It's just the.
Yeah. All right.
And on the script, he can skip to section 1 since he just read the top part.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are holding a public hearing regarding the application number 2205-01 SDR for William Bill Willis at 412 South Trade Street. This is a quasi judicial decision, unlike legislative hearings where personal opinions may come into play. Quasi judicial rulings must be grounded in relevant code and other approval criteria. If the application meets the code and other approval criteria of the city, the commission must approve it. The hearing will proceed as follows. We will first address preliminary legal matters. Then staff will make a presentation, including the application that is before us. Then the applicant will have the opportunity to present his application. Then members of the audience will be given the opportunity to speak. Finally, there will be a time for rebuttal by the applicant. I now call for the public hearing. Now covers the preliminary legal matters. Legal matters, burden of proof criteria and appeal rights. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the city of Amity development code, comprehensive plan, and any other applicable municipal code provision and Oregon statewide plan and goals. All testimony and evidence speakers give us must concern the approval criteria described in the staff report or other criteria in the development code and comprehensive plan that the person testifying believes should apply to the decision. Your testimony will be repetitious, but you will like the opportunity to appeal the decision. You must sign and submit a public testimony sheet before the hearing is closed by the chair. Only those who have appeared before the commission, in person or in writing, will have standing to appeal this item to the city council. Before the conclusion of the first public evidentiary hearing, this application, any participant may request a continuance or ask the record to be left open. Present additional information that is within the scope of the hearing. If there is a request, the decision maker will either continue the public hearing by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, continuance, or leave the record open for at least 7 days for additional written evidence or the testimony. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence in sufficient detail will give the decision maker and the party an opportunity to respond to the issue. Means that no appeal may be made to the state land use board of appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval in sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue with action for damages in certain court. Before we have the staff report, I will ask a few questions of the members of the commission and of the audience. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest for violence? No. Does any member of the commission wish to report any site visit or ex parte contacts?
Not since the application.
Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the planning commission to hear this matter? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the impartiality or ex parte disclosures of any member of the planning commission? That concludes the legal matters. Testimony tonight is going to follow in order. First up, the presentation of the staff report. Second, presentation of the applicant. Third, presentation of the proponents. Fourth, presentation of opponents. Fifth, testimony of neutral parties, including government bodies. Sixth is rebuttal by the applicant, limited to issues raised by opponents. So now we'll go to the staff report by Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. For the record, my name is Holly Byram, and I work for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. My role is to serve as the consulting city planner for the city of Amity. And my goal tonight is to help the Planning Commission understand the criteria that they need to use when they make a decision on this land use application. I apologize, I'm not there in person. We have a case of hand, foot, and mouth in our house, and I figured we'd keep it to ourselves. So the application in front of you tonight is a site design review. This Planning Commission has done a couple of those in recent years. Most recently, there was the Dollar General, and then there was the Cannabros dispensary. And so in a site design review, you're looking at all the components of the site to ensure that they are in compliance with the Amity Development Code. This is a commercial property on the main commercial strip in Amity. And it's a fairly unusual development because it's a mixed use development, which your general commercial zone does allow for. And there is an existing building on the site, so the property owner is adding to the existing development. So on the first page of the staff report there, just a summary of the facts and the proposal. Site design review is a type 2 application, which means that the Planning Commission is expected to make a final decision on this presumably tonight. And then any appeal would go to the City Council. Public notice was mailed just shy of the required date. So if anyone in the audience needs additional time, they can request a continuation. So on page 2 of the staff report there, you'll see on the vicinity and zone map, the location of the subject property. Just as a reminder, that's in the general commercial corridor. To the west is the industrial zone, and then across Trade Street to the east, additional general commercial. On page 3 of the staff report, I've included a screenshot of the property frontage there. So the existing gallery has, the building is right up against the public sidewalk there. And then they have a shared driveway that's paved off of Trade Street. The site plan at the bottom of page 3 shows that the applicant is proposing to use that existing curb cut for ingress and egress. And so that cars would access the site. They have a couple of new parking spaces proposed on their property. And then they've proposed to have a shared parking agreement with the property owner to the south there for additional parking. And then the new 2-story building there is shown in the rear of the existing building. Again, on the ground floor, it's proposed to be a woodworking and ceramic studio, so an artisan shop. And then on the second floor, 1 dwelling unit. On page 4 of the staff report, I've included the elevation so you can see what the building will look like. The decision criteria starts at the bottom of page 4. The first set of criteria come from the general commercial zone. And while we can't list every single potential land use in each of these zones, the Planning Commission can look at the description that's provided and determine whether or not this is generally consistent with the purpose of the zone and the other uses listed. So here in this zone, you see things like retail sales, service-related stores, amusement and recreation, and then residences permitted on a second floor above a commercial use. So you don't see artist studio in there, but you do see service related to retail use. And the applicant, in addition to creating product there to sell in the front gallery, they've also considered hosting community ceramics classes available to the general public, which is the reason why I put the recreation related business in there as an example of a permitted land use. So generally staff supports this application. The scale of it is consistent with the purpose of the zone there. There are some limitations on land uses listed at the bottom of page 5. And so basically it limits the amount of floor area that could be used for manufacturing and processing. And to do that, staff took the total amount of floor area dedicated to gallery and living space and the studio space, and it's under that 50% when you consider all the land uses on that property. And then there's also a standard about how all of the activities there have to be inside of a building. And they are proposed, the shop is proposed to be fully enclosed. The only exception being that there is an outdoor kiln that's proposed. And so when the applicant has an opportunity later to talk, maybe they can talk about how that needs to be outside, whether it's for safety reasons or ventilation. And so they can talk about that. For the Planning Commission's consideration, you might recommend a screening wall if there's any thought about either aesthetics or safety. You can keep that in mind. In terms of dimensional standards, there's no concerns about setbacks or height limits. All of that is met. The building generally faces Trade Street. And then on the bottom of page 7 is where your site design criteria start. And these are criteria about the site itself and the site plan. And I want to say that the property owner and his representative put a lot of time and effort into this. We had a number of conversations with them, starting with the pre-application conference and a lot of emails and phone calls back and forth. And I appreciate that they were very responsive to staff's feedback, and they've done a number of different revisions to the site plan. And so they put a lot of work into this. The first part of the criteria talks about streets. There's no proposed change to their street frontage there. The next is about off-street parking. As you'll remember, off-street parking is an equation that tallies the total amount of parking for all the land uses on the site. In this case, there's a special formula for the retail space, the residential space, and the artisan shop space, which equals roughly 9 parking spaces required. The applicant is proposing 4 on their property, and then the development code does allow for joint use of parking. And so that's where they're proposing to share parking with the neighboring business. And so what's proposed on site is, I believe it's 4 plus 7. So I believe there's 11 total spaces available. And there's only 9 required here. So the hair salon would potentially take 2.5 parking spaces in their daily operation. So it looks like parking can be met here on site if that joint use is allowed here. The neighboring property owner has signed that they support that, and they are willing to sign a permanent easement for that parking and access. The next part is about loading areas. None is required here. In terms of bicycle parking, 2 spaces are required and 2 are proposed. The parking areas and the driveways are required to be paved. The applicant understands that. The bottom of page 9 is the applicant's response regarding utilities and facilities. The city engineer and public works have reviewed the proposal, and there's no concerns about the city's ability to provide facilities and utilities here. So this site can be serviced. Let's see, the applicant is showing that they meet that 10% required minimum of landscaping. They will provide, or they have provided a little more detail to that after the staff report was sent out. In terms of drainage and erosion control, part of this property is already paved and more of it is proposed to be paved with this development. There's a threshold of 5,000 square feet. And if you pass that amount of impervious surface, that's building plus paving, then you trip into providing an engineered stormwater plan. And this application does not pass that threshold. And so the city engineer has approved the site plan that they provided without that engineered stormwater plan. Let's see. In terms of site circulation, the applicant is proposing a pedestrian walkway that goes from the front sidewalk along the existing building and then to the new building in the back. It's shown to be 3 feet, but the city engineer is recommending 4 feet wide. And then bottom of page 11 for screening and buffering. Those are required when there's like trash enclosures or large parking lots. In this case, the applicant's not going to have a dumpster out there. They're just going to bring bins in and out of that building. And so the only screening that may be required here would be if the kiln needs to be screened with a half wall or something like that. Other than that, staff supports this application. The recommendation is for approval subject to the recommended conditions. Those are included starting on page 12. It's important to get that reciprocal access and parking agreement signed between this property owner and the one to the south. We need to make sure and have that recorded before we approve those building permits to make sure that we're not approving a non-conforming situation here. It's important that that parking gets paved. It's important, I believe, though, they're required to put in at least 1 ADA parking space there, and it looks like they may need to do a little more configuration with the dimensions on that, but that should be easy enough to meet. Just for the applicant's information, it's common for a site plan to have these types of conditions. So once you get your approval, you'll take one last revision and then resubmit that to the city before you get your building permits. Let's see. So nothing else unusual there in the conditions. These are all standard conditions. You know, if they need a sign, they need to have a city permit for that. The lighting should not shine into the right of way or other properties. Building permits are issued by Yamhill County in partnership with the city. And we have the standard nuisance language in there, and maybe this is something that the applicant can address just for the Planning Commission's information. So a nuisance is something that could be offensive or obnoxious to neighbors. And in here it says, by reason of odors, dust, smoke, noise, light, or vibration. So it might be helpful for the applicant just to talk about what their operation is like, what kind of sounds and smells, just so that they understand what it would look like. Okay, and then the recommended motion for conditional approval is located on the bottom of page 15. Exhibit A to the staff report are the engineer's comments. Again, there's some details in there about the ADA dimensions. And then Exhibit B is the application itself. So that is it from me, but I am happy to answer any questions the Planning Commission has now, or we can go straight into the applicant's comments if they'd like to do that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Holly? Okay, now we go on to the applicant's presentation. So, if you want to state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is William Willis. I go by Bill. My address is 320 Northeast Fircrest Drive, McMinnville. I heard a couple of things that Holly wanted to have me address. Other than those things, I really have no presentation unless there are questions to be answered. The first thing I'll talk about is the kiln. We will have an outside gas kiln. It'll be between the existing building and the proposed building, and we will enclose that with a chain link fence and possibly even a stem wall or a block wall, because it is a gas-fired kiln. And my son, who is the ceramics guy, he's gone through this several times at McMinnville High School. He teaches ceramics there, and occasionally, with the wind that we have here, it will blow the pilot. So we'll have to put something up in order to keep the pilot pipe from blowing out. I would like to it'll have to have some kind of a covering over it also, something along the line of a gazebo or something like that to attach the chimney through and run it through. As far as, are there any questions on the kiln? I'm sorry my son couldn't be here because he's the expert, but I can answer basic questions about the kiln. If you have.
How tall is the kiln?
I know we have the dimensions somewhere, but I don't think I had them with me, but and I don't know for sure that we have decided on the exact size of the kiln, but I have seen the kiln that he has at McMinnville High School, and I would say the kiln sets about this high and then has a chimney coming out above that, and it sets on a cement pad. And then it has a door that rolls on the pad to open and close. So.
And you were talking about the wall that goes around it. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, we would like to have at least a chain link fence to begin with, and maybe slats in the chain link fence, something to cut the wind, but we want to have it enclosed so that people can't get into the kiln. We'll be firing the kiln primarily during daylight hours, and we'll have someone there because the temperature has to be watched and adjusted. But we don't want anyone messing with the kiln, so it will be enclosed with a chain link fence. Anything else on the kiln?
I guess one more question about the I guess you call it the chimney. So when something is fired, what, does smoke come out of the chimney or is it just the heat? It's just
the heat.
Yeah. So,
Now, Holly wanted me to address like the noises and so forth that may come out of the building. I currently do a lot of woodworking where I'm at right now. But it'll be a normal wood shop type situation where we'll have a table saw, a cutoff saw. We will be spraying a limited amount of top coat and so forth, but we'll have an inside portable booth to contain that. So that won't be an issue. And as far as noise goes, we won't be operating it when people are sleeping. So I don't think the noise will be a big issue. It hasn't been, and directly behind me, there's the shop there where they repair like dumpsters and so forth, where they have grinders and so forth. So that activity is going on right on the other side of my fence right now. And it won't be any different than that. I wouldn't think it would be any louder than that. Do you have any questions about what we plan to do inside the building?
It may help to elaborate, like when you're operating hours, something close to the.
Well, I would think 8 to 5 would be 8 to 6 in the shop itself. We could operate earlier than that, but our hours can be adjusted to whatever. I mean, we won't be as loud as the train coming through.
I suppose it's possible we have classes at night as well.
Classes primarily will be at night in the ceramic studio, yeah. And on the weekends. Is there anything else you would like me to address? There were a couple of things that Polly asked for. One was concerning the landscaping, and I provided her with a proposal after the information that we currently have was sent out, and she has that now. And roughly what we propose with the landscaping is putting in a drip system. And since we do ceramics and we have to have some kind of landscaping, on the back end of the property, we have a 10-foot easement that the city has, so we can't build on that. We want to cover that, landscape it, and put pots with plants on that location, because there's always a possibility that could be dug up if the city needed to get in there, and then that landscaping can be moved. Currently behind the kiln, I have 2 rhododendrons that will be able to stay, and one shrub we're taking out. So we'll maintain that. In the front where the sign is, it's just a small area. I figured that planting daffodils would be a nice touch, since Amity is known for the Daffodil Festival. And maybe we have a little strip alongside the current building that could be put into plants like daffodils and so forth. We're really, really close on that 10%. So if we need a little bit more, we could also put some potted plants in the area around the kiln. If we have a gazebo, that we could even do some hanging plants to address that a little bit. And there was one other thing. Pertaining to the parking, Charmaine is here, so we need to ask her any questions about that. But she did submit in writing that the little shed that they have on the back of their property would be taken down. And that would be turned into parking. That's part of the proposal. So, and that was turned in to you after this was sent out. So those two things have been taken care of. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Let's see, do we need to declare a time limit for testimony? There's a lot of long-winded testimony. Doesn't look like it. Okay. All speakers before speaking, please clearly state your full name and mailing address, and physical address, as well as the like. If you have any written material or other evidence you'd like us to see, please hand it to the staff. The staff will distribute it to members of the commission and the applicant as well. Let's place it in record of the skill. Now we'll move on to public testimony. We would like to testify this evening. Please indicate the raising your hand in the Zoom meeting. Is there anybody on the Zoom meeting?
Just Holly.
Holly. Everyone interested in speaking will have an opportunity to do so. All others, that's presumed. So, on to presentation of the proponents. Who wants to speak on behalf of this project? Okay, presentation of proponents. Anybody want to speak? Yes, please. Testimony of neutral parties, including government bodies.
And I'll just echo what Holly said, the developers and the property owner have been very responsive to our requests. This has been a very arduous process, almost a year, if not more. I think overall the city is good with the proposal and approval of the conditions listed. I think we're there. So we'll give our support to that leading this process.
Okay. Well, let's see, there was no comments that's kind of addressing. Is any party request to continue this public hearing? So seeing that, we'll move directly to any questions of staff. Does the staff have any further comments or clarification with regard to this application? Does any member of the commission have any questions for the staff?
One quick comment. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
During this process, we of course send out the request for comments to different city departments and agencies. And we did send a request to the fire department and they were able to take a look. And they did not have any concerns about water or access here at this location. I imagine they'll have one more review with those building permits at that point. I failed to mention there is a gravel alley that goes from this property around the back of Amity Flats down to 5th Street. That gravel alley is not proposed to be used as ingress or egress with this application. So it wasn't reviewed for any kind of turning radius dimensions, and it's not proposed to be paved or anything like that. So just thought I would mention that they're related to fire access.
Holly, this is Lou. Did the fire department have any issues with the kiln itself?
They sat in on the initial pre-application conference. I think they understand the proposal pretty well. They didn't have any red flags about that. Perhaps Mike remembers any specifics about that. But I think the ability for the applicant to shut off the gas was peace of mind there.
That's correct. Their concerns were with gas shut off, access to the kiln, which the developer and property owner have already discussed. And then there was during the pre-app, there was a conversation about necessity of sprinkler and fire suppression systems, which we have worked through, and the proposal has met the requirements.
Any questions? So we will now close the public hearing. Move on to deliberations. The chair will now open discussion for deliberation by the commission. Commission members may also ask clarifying questions of staff. The administrator can move the comments or make a motion.
All motions to approve the site design review application we file 2205-01 and documenting and recommending conditions of approval.
Second. The properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? None will proceed to vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. This is the final decision by the planning commission. This decision may be appealed to. This decision may be appealed by those standing to the city council within 12 days after the mailing of the signed final decision. Thank you for everyone who testified tonight. Your comments have been very helpful. That concludes that.
Holly, correct me if I'm a quick point, since no one testified either for or against the proposal, there's the 12-day waiting period is pretty much a formality. It's no one can have standing if they try to challenge it at this point.
Right, so at this point, staff will send out a written notice of decision, and there is that appeal period on there. So while no one else really can appeal because they didn't testify tonight, the applicant could always appeal if they were unhappy with one of the conditions and they wanted to take it to the city council.
So up next is work session. Dealing with the rules of psilocybin and marijuana related activities. I would say this.
Holly, you can't do it, but I mean, you can. If you go to your, please go to right.
You're going the wrong way. Locked in.
Do we need to send a search and rescue party?
Yeah.
Chrissy, were you guys able to get the maps printed in color?
Yes.
Okay, great. I felt silly asking that question if City Hall could do that, but you never know when these printers are going to go out on you.
So what are we doing with the psilocybin? I haven't been seated. Animals, did it pass? The 2-year moratorium, did that pass?
I'm sure Mike would like to weigh in on that.
Like seeing its work will come on.
This map, it's changed at all.
Yeah.
I apologize, we had a few questions as to. Okay, I'm ready, sorry.
We thought you might want to tee this one up, Mike.
I can do this up really quickly. So as of Thursday night, the ballots were in favor of a 2-year moratorium on psilocybin as a ballot measure for the Amity voters, which would give us 2 years to complete this process. We have some time, but that being stated, the city council would like to see a set of proposals come up to them in short order so they can work with it and get it into the books long before any changes come up. So we talked about this, I believe, in October, of some of the thought processes we had for a restriction in time, place, means for the manufacturer and for the servicing of psilocybin in the city. And a couple of the comments that you had brought up were a 1,000-foot buffer around churches, schools, places where kids congregate, as well as some restrictions on the, like, how they would be, the servicing could be taking place. And you also requested, in addition to, in a conversation, in addition to that, also putting in writing the restrictions that we currently have for marijuana. Holly confirmed that most of the marijuana restrictions are already written into Oregon state law, so those are kind of good to go. But the psilocybin, that's being left to us, so we basically attempted to match the Amity Development Code to the Oregon state law with some with some extra restrictions based off of what your guidance was. So Holly come back with us, but I'll try and go through this as quickly as possible. So we've the first chapter of the Amity Development Code basically all must have a definition so everyone knows what we're talking about. So we have defined hemp, we have defined marijuana, we've defined the processors, producers, what the requirements are. We've then gone on to define psilocybin, what a related use is for psilocybin laboratories, manufacturers, a service center, and psilocybin services. For the purposes of our restrictions, the manufacturer, the service center, and the services are the areas in which we can attempt to restrict.
So now these definitions basically, or we state definitions or
Yes, most of them are poached from either
the ORS.
the ORS, well, definitely for marijuana. Those are pretty much verbatim copies that Holly found in the ORSs. The psilocybin is predominantly based off the measure that was passed as to what they define these things are, as well as I entered in some of the information of came off of the DEA and ATF websites as how they legally define those. So it's as accurate as we can make it based off the guidance and the law.
Can I touch on something real quick?
Please.
So there are 5 marijuana related activities or uses that could potentially go into a city. And that's why it's important to list all of them here. And then there are 3 regulated activities for psilocybin. And so it's important that each of those are listed and defined because they could be potentially allowed in different zones. And it's also worth noting that hemp, industrial hemp, is regulated differently than marijuana. And so whereas marijuana is regulated by the OLCC, which was the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, which is now the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, hemp is regulated by the Oregon Department of Ag. There's more crossover now and interagency support than there used to be. So it's kind of hard to keep up with their current regulations, but it's just worth noting that hemp is different than marijuana, and typically hemp is treated like any other agricultural product when it comes to looking at your zoning, and you'd be looking for your industrial zone. So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, that being said, that brings a good point. So for all intents and purposes, everything you will see from this point forward more or less ignores hemp, for lack of a better word, because it is considered an agricultural product, not a consumable product in those kinds of. So chapter 2, we broke it out into the different subsections. Of note, I made a typo that actually squeaked through Holly's keen eye. It's supposed to be section 2.307, and the first subparagraph went to 2.305. That was a cut and paste error on my part, so it should all be 7. We'll fix that for the final.
Plenty of time for that.
So if you go into the zoning requirements into section 2, you'll see that we've had to include that basically the permitted uses throughout the city. The last 2 we've added are sections S and T, which basically allows for marijuana retail subject to section 2306, which is basically going to reiterate the standards of Oregon state law, and then psilocybin, which is section 2307. Continuing onward, actually goes through the sections of interest. Light industrial zone allows for this is, I'm now in section 210602. The marijuana processor, marijuana producer, testing laboratory, marijuana wholesaler, and are subject to the basically Oregon state law. And psilocybin manufacturer, psilocybin laboratory, and are subject to section 2307. So that's the addition. Going into
Can we take a step back really quick?
please.
So going back to the commercial zone, I think we all understand what a marijuana retailer is like, because we've approved one in Amity and it's, underway. I'm not sure what their status is currently.
About 2 months out from completion.
Okay, so we've all seen the marijuana retailers in other communities. What comes to mind is a lot of, flashing lights and waving flags and people coming and going, and it's people purchasing product to take home and use for recreational use. The psilocybin service center is dramatically different than that. I didn't know this until performing research recently, but it's almost more like a clinical setting, and that a patient or a client would come in and have an administered session with a provider, which can last somewhere between, I don't know what was it 2 to 8 hours? And so it's administered to a customer over the extent of many hours in that they don't take a product and leave with it. And so it's a supervised session. So it's a really different atmosphere than what we've seen with the marijuana retailers. But they're both proposed to be included in the general commercial zone because it is a customer related retail exchange, as opposed to those uses proposed for the industrial zone. But again, this can be a discussion. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it, Holly.
Yeah.
Always helpful to go back. So basically get into the sections of relevancy. And before we go in here, so today's work session basically is for you to collectively have hopefully taken the opportunity to read this before tonight or look through it. And I'm going through most of this for our audience who probably have not read this, but for the most part, it's just to see if there's any changes, alterations, revisions, edits, things that you are guidance you want to give us to go forward so we can make further revisions and then bring this back to basically a final okay. So this is, consider this like a rough draft, the first draft. We're looking for inputs and consideration. We'll get into one detail here, which is also why we have the map in front of you. So I will get to the map here shortly and then we can discuss that. But for the time being, marijuana related uses, it basically states 230601 as regulated by the state of Oregon, and includes marijuana processor, producer, marijuana retailer, marijuana testing laboratory, marijuana wholesaler. That gets back to Holly's comments about all the different types of marijuana usage that are in the state law. You go through here, we basically state that you have to have a marijuana related use inside a permanent building, cannot have drive-through facilities, Cannot have outdoor storage. Public access is prohibited, meaning the producer, marijuana processor, marijuana testing laboratory, marijuana wholesaler facility shall be limited to employees, personnel, and guests over the age of 21, authorized by the facility operator. So it can't be like a supermarket where everyone just can walk in and walk out. There needs to be some regulation in that. Permitting related use shall be done registered in good standing. Basically, this is the regulation that they must meet OHA and OLCC requirements, and then basically get at the very end a business permit from us, a business license from us. But we're not going to give it until basically they've met all the state and local requirements. So that's a given. Secure disposal, basically they can't just dump it in the trash can. They have to properly secure the disposal of marijuana remnants or byproducts, and they shall not be placed within the facility's exterior refuse container. Like again, they just can't put it in the trash can. It has to be securely set in there. And actually, Holly can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe OHA and the OLCC describe exactly how excess oil, whatever the terminology is, marijuana must be like in sealed bags, it must be in these containers. So that's already all spelled out. Additional standards. So this is kind of where it gets into your guidance. Additional standards basically can't be in a conflicting use buffer, so they can't be within 1,000 feet of a lot containing any of the following uses. This is predominantly the ORS, but we've added a few in here and this gets to the map. Public or elementary or secondary school with the attendance is compulsory, so that's basically all three of our Amity schools. They're prohibited within private or parochial elementary or secondary schools teaching children as described, so that's any private schools. And other locations where children congregate, which makes the Amity City Park, our city library, any church in the city, and licensed daycare centers, of which we have one, would be restricted. And then the 1,000-foot buffer shall be measured by a straight line, so it kind of shows that. So if you look at the map we provided, you can see all the different overlapping circles of all the different facilities that make this restriction. And you'll see that this same set of restrictions also then will apply to psilocybin. So last but not least in here, because we already have a facility in here, if you look at the map, the kind of the purplish circles near the top, they're for her, these circles here, for all of you, it's the one up by the elementary school, then the high school. You'll notice right about here, there's a little gap and it says 108. 108 is where the current marijuana dispensary is going into place. That's the one we've approved, and that's the one under construction. And if you'll notice, based off the old setup, that was the only place in the entire city where that would be allowed, and therefore that's where they're building it. If you notice now, if you include the city park, that would no longer be allowed because now the city park puts a 1,000-foot buffer. It's inside 1,000 foot of the city park. For that reason, we have basically put in a grandfather clause or grandmother clause, whatever you want to call it, that states licensed marijuana retail is established lawfully prior to the adoption of these standards are permitted to remain while operating in compliance with local and state regulations. Grandfather marijuana retail locations are not transferable between retail businesses. What that means is if Canopy Rose someday we could go out of business, they couldn't just turn everything over to a new licensee and then continue operating. So, or if the building gets sold to somebody else who comes in and turns it into a car parts distributor, and then somebody else comes back 4 years later, so let's say 6 years down the road, and then says, well, I want to go back and turn it into a dispensary again, then it wouldn't be allowed under the new guidance. So as long as Canopy Rose stays there, remains there, and operates as a licensed marijuana retailer, they're good to go because you've already approved it and they've been grandfathered. Obviously, the exemptions are based off of industrial hemp and into personal uses, and in the procedures explains how they have to go through the process of getting in, which you're already familiar with. They have to come and get their compatibility statements. They have to go through the application process, much like what Earth and Wood just did, get their necessary registration and go through there. So for all intents and purposes, this is what you asked for marijuana. with the exception of, allowing Canterbury that's already there to continue. Now to the psilocybin.
Wait, can I pause for a moment?
Yes, please.
Okay, if we could just linger on this map for a minute. Because this is what makes or breaks your code here. So there are currently 3 schools in Amity. In the city council's discussion, they wanted to be forward thinking and look ahead for, my understanding is the middle school campus would no longer be used for a middle school purpose in the next few years. Is that accurate?
Going through the pre-bond and planning right now, everything is what we budgeted, everything is same. I would not speculate a little more about it.
Okay. So what this map shows is that the elementary school and the high school are in those purple circles, and the middle school has a black circle around it because that was the discussion there. Those 1,000-foot buffers around schools are already in the ORS for marijuana retail and psilocybin service centers. So you don't even need to have those in your code if you don't want to. They are already in the ORS. And my understanding is the OHA is required to confirm that when they issue permitting for psilocybin service centers. So if you do nothing today, if you do nothing this year or next year, those 1,000-foot buffers already apply. And so what that leaves us is still just one property in Amity where either of those uses could take place. Now that we had the discussion, oh, go ahead.
So the one property she's referencing is the current Canterbury property.
Correct. Yeah. And so then there was the desire to add the other places where children congregate. And I understand that desire, and 1,000 feet is a long way. And so that buffer essentially covers the entire city. And so the question here is, what are we legally required to provide? What are we required to allow? It depends whether or not we allow those grandfathered businesses to be transferable or reinstated at some point. The question is whether or not we need that extra buffer around the other places, because already we're just down to one property.
My question is, this map essentially prohibits any new, like psilocybin clinic. Can we actually do that?
Well, that was what I was going to get to at the end. She's going a little ahead of me, but I'll let her.
Sorry there. The city has the option to outright prohibit psilocybin service centers, but they need to do it through a general election. So if you wanted to go that route, you'd have to do it in a transparent way, and you'd have to have your residents vote on it in 2024. The city council did not choose to go that route. They chose to do the 2-year moratorium so they could set the time, place, and manner standards that we're talking about today. So they opted not to outright prohibit it. They just wanted to guide it.
But this map basically prohibits it.
Yes.
Okay.
And if I may feel a little bit of Polly's thunder there. So there is a measure that was passed by the state for legalizing psilocybin does have a statement in there that basically says you cannot do a backdoor prohibition to psilocybin in your community through zoning or other means, and in some aspect this process would be a backdoor complete prohibition. When the council talked about this, they were kind of split on the topic. They were considering the putting to the voters an outright ban at the time for this election that just happened. But they were split enough as a council and they didn't want to go against what the voters as a state had already approved, which is why we went forward with the moratorium, with the idea that the moratorium would sunset in 2 years, giving us enough time to fix this and get the time, place, and manner set up. And then in 2 years, psilocybin would be legalized inside the city limits, and then we would have our setup already established, and we'd be off of the races. I know, I believe where you may stand, that you've expressed this before, is there is a contingent that would like to see us go forward in 2024 and put an outright prohibition on the ballot, and then do a full prohibition in 2 years' time. I can't predict what the council wants to do or can do. All I can tell you right now is that the council's guidance and as the vote is being counted right now, is that we have a 2-year moratorium. We can't prohibit it, so we need to set something up that is not a backdoor prohibition. But it does allow it in some aspect. How that comes about is basically what you're going to discuss. So, we don't have to solve it all tonight. Maybe we can do a future meetings. We have obviously have the time to do that, but this is kind of the proposal. So what Holly was trying to express was that right now, any place in the city theoretically that could be used for a commercial retail space to do psilocybin servicing, as you mentioned, in a clinic setting with the practitioner giving the dosage, watching the person doing that, is almost already eliminated just simply because of the state law of the 2,000-foot buffers around our schools. So, in one aspect, the city park, the churches, the daycare center, all those are more or less overkill. But also in that aspect eliminates the one potential property, which is now currently Canna Bros, from ever potentially having a psilocybin operation in its place. So, Holly, if I've missed anything or misstated anything, chime in here, but that's kind of where we stand right now. And so I was actually going to bring this up at the very end after I went through everything, but since we're there now, that's kind of where we are. So I'll open it up for questions.
Why is the city council worried about what the state is doing? Their cannabis city council. Should counties handle it and not the state level? The 3 counties do, they haven't done it. Oh, the rest of the state. So I can't see why they're bound to Portland. You shouldn't say it.
Well, political aside, the supremacy of state law. So it's passed at the state, and the state made it legal. It's legal everywhere. The caveat in the state law was that a local municipality could put in a restriction. And the council was split on that discussion, with some council members recognizing that there is potential therapeutic and medicinal purpose for that can help individuals, and did not want to take that away, and also did not want to take away the potential of future, although it's not established yet, and may never be, potential future tax revenue, business licenses, business operations, etc. There was additional other members of the council that kind of leaned in your direction and basically said, this is ridiculous. We don't want it here. Let's just outright ban it and put that to the voters. After much discussion, the compromise was to put the 2-year moratorium in place to the voters now and get the rules into place, see what OHA comes out with in the next 2 years as far as their regulations, their restrictions, but their state, because right now OHA doesn't really have a playbook. They just kind of said, go for it, and then we'll figure it out later. So this gives us an opportunity to massage these rules. So maybe 18 months from now, we figure out that OHA has gone crazy. We can come back and restrict it even further, change our code, et cetera. It gave us more flexibility. The state law also stipulates that if you want to do an election, it must be held on an even year election. So that would be 2024. It must be put to the voters, as Holly said, for a vote. It has to be transparent and open. So the council, as it stands in 2024, I don't know what that's going to look like or who's going to be in charge then, could theoretically say, yeah, we screwed this up. We're in agreement with you, your perspective. We are going to try and do this. We can now put another ballot measure out there and do a full restriction and take our chances. But right now, it's simply a moratorium. And so that's where we are. I hope that answers your question. It was kind of a messy thing, but it does kind of fall at the very end of the supremacy of state law.
One other thing, just for information purposes, in the discussion about the new school building, the district office that is there now is most likely going to be used for tutoring fifth year seniors to get them through their GED. So it will remain an educational facility.
So if that were the case, right now, it doesn't qualify as one, it's admin, the school itself constituted, it may not be relevant for the sole fact that it's, the part, that little green quad out front is considered a place where kids congregate, so for some of how you set this up, that in of itself could be the 1,000-foot buffer. If you don't go that route, which is the green circles, and you turn it in, and that does become a school zone, then the way you set your regulations up in your code here, for those, if that would automatically fall within that 10,000-foot buffer of a school building, which is already declared in the state law. So it would just 1,000, sorry. So it would then ground zero would basically shift a little bit further south to cover that building if and when it does become a learning center.
Right. One, just for information.
And the council did debate the fact that at one point, the projection was the middle school building would no longer be a school. We didn't know about that part. It would no longer be a school within 3 to 5 years. And if that went away, you already look at that, it's the black circle on there. It would open up maybe 2, potentially, possibly 2 new lots near the south end of town, but not, maybe not really. Doesn't really change anything, even if that school does go away. This is why we did this 1,000-foot buffer, so you can see what's out there. All that said, really, there's only one lot in this city, even because of the way the schools are located, that would even be allowed to be silo-sided if they so chose. But the way Canterbury is set up, as you recall, when they came in and did their site design review, they don't have a clinician space or place in their facility to do that. It's basically countertop, couple tables, storage in the back. It's this very small building, so they would, if they wanted to do psilocybin, they would have to come back and basically redo their site design and re-permit their building because it's not set up to even handle this.
So what's the green buffer? Is that 2.307.03 paragraph 3? Is that what that is?
Yes, it's basically the other areas which are where children congregate, including public parks, public library, churches, and licensed daycare centers. So you'll note that it basically aligns with our city park, which is 298 is the stretch. This hash mark here, it corresponds to the city library and Amity, right across the street here, the church there, which because it also congregates with kids for the food bank. And then the other green circles are for the green space down in front of the middle school, 2 more churches, and then the licensed daycare. And then at the very bottom south in the town is the another church. So.
So that's the part where the city charter differentiates from the Oregon state charter that.
That's correct. That's correct. So the state law right now is your 2 purple circles that kind of make the figure 8 at the top of the center top of the map. And then as Holly mentioned, the black circle that's kind of in there is centered on the current location of the middle school. And the reason it's black is it's just in case it goes away sometime in the future. That would go away, but then you notice there's already a giant overlap with the high school and middle school. So, but yeah, that's how they define the 1,000-foot buffers. There was another proposal, I think, at one point, and I believe the city of Dayton was doing this. They and some other, I think McMinnville also does this, where they had a 1,000-foot distance between retail facilities, so you couldn't have 2 facilities within 1,000 feet of each other. And Holly actually asked me if I wanted that mapped out as well, and I was like, that's just, at this point, that's.
No, it's a good idea. We should probably do that too.
It basically, it's significant overkill, so, we didn't map that out, but. So that's the map, I know I stole a lot of Holly's thunder, I'll let her get the last word there.
Oh, I think the map is just really helpful for all of us to understand how far 1,000 feet go in a city the size of Amity. And I think we'll still get into the code section here in a moment about psilocybin, but since there's just one property basically that's at play here is how we allow that to be transferred and whether or not that's transferable and what type of criteria we use moving forward. Because if we want to be able to say that we allow these two uses, we need to have a plan in place for doing that beyond the current business. But go ahead, Mike.
So the rules as stated right now allow for the grandfathering end of Canterbury at 108.3. And then what Holly was describing, and this is basically 2-30603 letter Charlie. So that's something that we could discuss. And then going into psilocybin, you'll note that it's very similar to what we just did for marijuana, where we discussed it's allowed by Oregon state law. The related uses, again, permanent building must have no outdoor storage, no public access, must be regulated and under good standing with the health authority, Department of Agriculture, et cetera, secure disposal. And then we go down here for the additional standards. The 1,000 foot buffer is again, basically looking at state law. And then we've added the we've added the letter B, the psilocybin service center shall not be established in a residential zone. That is part of the state law requirements. So that's one of our, that's pretty good there. We did put in the conflicting use of describing A is established with 1,000 foot of legally established psilocybin service center. Service center may be remained until its legally established location. So that's an option there. Established service centers. What this basically means, that was letter D was basically in case the ballot measure failed, and therefore the community basically said we're going to allow psilocybin come 1 January 2023, and anyone who can come in and open up a business. If someone beat us to the punch before we got these restrictions in place, and they put a psilocybin business in Amity, and then we cleared these development codes, they would obviously be grandfathered and allowed. Since it looks like the moratorium is going to go into effect, this should still be kept in place, but is less important because we shouldn't have anyone come in before the codes are established. Hours of operation, et cetera, there. What the established service center, I should also mention, this also gets to work kind of Holly was explaining. If at some point this letter D may also allow Canterbury's, let's say a year from now, or after the moratorium expires, to come to us and basically said, we have reconfigured our building, we have done the necessary permitting with OHA and OLCC. We would like to actually establish a psilocybin servicing center inside our facility. Since they've already been established they could theoretically be allowed to do that because they're in that property, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where I think Holly's getting into that gray area of what you're looking at, where you want to go with this. So
listen, I have to say that putting a commercial marijuana shop in the same category as a psilocybin clinic, however people feel about it, they are just not the same thing. And, the notion that this, the marijuana shop that's gonna be open probably in a few months would all of a sudden, become basically a psychiatric clinic. I mean, I get that, there's a legal issue, but I just think putting those two together is really, it's not reality. I mean, they are really completely different things. And again, putting aside whether you agree with it or not, they are not, a suicidal clinic is not a commercial establishment like a pot shop. I mean, it's just not. People do not walk out with shrooms when they go to a clinic. I mean, again, however you feel about it, it's closer to a psychiatric clinic than a pot shop is closer to a liquor store, and a suicidal clinic is closer to a psychiatric clinic. I mean, again, putting aside whether you agree with it or not, thinking that a pot shop is all of a sudden going to turn into a suicidal clinic, I just don't think it's realistic.
Holly?
No, I agree. And the building that Cannon Bros built is specifically designed for a retail space and a back office. It's not designed with clinical rooms for that type of a treatment facility. So.
I mean, there are not doctors dispensing marijuana. There are doctors that are going to be overseeing, and again,
Right.
putting aside how you feel about it, I just think we have to be really clear that these are two different things.
Absolutely, I agree. And any type of a clinic would be allowed in a general commercial zone. The ORS does say specifically that these psilocybin service centers are not medical facilities, but any type of a medical clinic would be allowed in this general commercial zone.
So I guess what we're looking at right now is at a detailed weeds and seeds level is does the terminology, the spelling, the breakdown, all this meet your requirement, your desires, are we good there? And at a 30,000 foot level, are you comfortable or should we continue to allow this secondary buffer of places where children congregate, sort of thing, knowing that basically is a backdoor prohibition and could be challenged in court, and basically goes against what the voters just approved, which was a 2-year moratorium. So I don't know if I'm missing something else there, Holly, but that's kind of where we're looking at right now as to what you want to get to. I know it's late. It's one of those things we can discuss. This start it now. You can give me some guidance. We can come back on a later meeting and try again, knowing full well that I believe in probably 1 or 2 more city council, planning commission meetings. We're probably going to get another big site design review that'll pop up. So it could be another really long meeting if there's time. Probably if we can tackle it now, it's really up to your wishes, how you want to.
My 2 cents is I'm fine with all the lines, all the boundaries, the bigger the better.
Okay.
That's mine.
I mean, this would all specifically prohibited in the language that was put into the statement, right? That's what we just want to do. This is specifically a backdoor prohibition.
Yes, because we are adding in our terminology the additional buffers around parks, places where kids congregate, et cetera, or psilocybin that basically eliminates a lot of this area that is not currently in the guidance. Marijuana is a little different because that's already been established and the rules are there. So it could be broken out like you have this prohibition for marijuana, but not for psilocybin. You can do no prohibition at all. And when I say prohibition, I mean the 1,000-foot prohibited circles.
The other places in the lower right-hand green circle, what is that?
That is Amity, I believe that is Amity Christian Church. So it's basically Amity Christian Church, the green space in front of the middle school, I believe there's a Lutheran church there as well. And then up here is the public library, Amity Christian Church, or Amity Assembly of God right across the street, and then our city park. Those are the red hash areas.
So just for the sake of the argument, one could say, we don't need this other category because all of Amity's commercial properties are covered by the school buffers that are in the Oregon revised statutes. So we're good. However, a person could rezone a property. For example, an industrial property could potentially be rezoned commercial. It's not easy to do, but it is feasible. So just keep that in mind, that while the other category may be excessive, there may be some compromise because there could potentially be different commercial properties in the future.
Right now, if you look at this, most, if not all, the industrial which are the gray areas, and they're labeled 109, 211, et cetera, 109, 110. They're bordering the railroad tracks, and for the time being, most of these properties have housing on them, or they already have a light industrial property established on them, be it Amity Truck and Tractor, the self-storage sheds, and the facility right across the street, et cetera. So what she's referencing is if somebody came in, we kind of did what Dollar General did. If somebody came in, tore down a couple of those houses, joined the lots up to make a bigger lot, and then decided that they wanted to establish a psilocybin facility on that, get its own commercial. If the buffer's not there, then they would be, for the code, good to go, because we didn't put that buffer in there. That I believe that's what you're alluding to. Yeah. So on the flip side, if no one ever does that, and we have these prohibitions, the city could be open to a lawsuit for going in and putting a backdoor prohibition against state law. And if we got challenged by somebody, be it a big corporate business developer, an individual, et cetera, the city would lose, because we have established this in contradiction to state law.
Well, ultimately, to me, I think it's gonna get voted on again in 2024, right? But
That-
people are gonna be allowed basically to decide what they want to do. It's
Yeah.
really up to the planning to say, we're favoring this crap. We're just gonna step in and do it.
There's no guarantee that in 2024, the city council will vote to put this on the ballot again. It's
If
only
they know what happens, it's just.
the moratorium is already in the ordinance. Per the state law and the way we set up the ordinance would sunset, and then psilocybin would be psilocybin will be allowed in Amity city limits per the established code in place December 31st of that year. So it'd be at whatever's in place as of 31 December 2024 would be how the law of the land when the code sunsets. So
That seems unlikely, right? I mean, why would they not put it on?
well, the indication of some of the council members was we put in a moratorium, planning commission comes up with some good rules as to where and how we're good to go. And then and then we're done. And then if somebody wants to come in and someday put in a psilocybin thing, we are meeting the state law. We haven't put in a full prohibition. We have our means and time and place restrictions in place. And then a developer can come in here and try, they meet it, they get to put one in. If they can't, they're good. I know there's a contingent of folks that would like to see this put up on the ballot, but it's up to the city council whether they want to have this voted on again in 2024. As it's established right now, if they do nothing, it's allowed inside city limits come January 1st, 2025.
On one property.
Yeah, and it would only be that one property. For now.
It would only be that one property, estimated, there's no.
No other changes to our zoning or properties, et cetera, et cetera. So. That was the best compromise. Now, I can't predict what the city council is going to want to do in 2 years. The council may, the composition of the council may change in such a way that they're willing to put a ballot measure out there to either extend another 2-year moratorium or an outright prohibition, but I won't make that call or that prediction. It's just, it's too. It's not.
So is the sensible approach to draw a map which allows it somewhere?
I think what my recommendation as a city administrator would be on behalf of staff, although I may be contradicted by some, is that we leave it as far as the buffer, so just be around the schools, so the 3 schools. But the idea being that the middle school is probably going to be there for the foreseeable future. And then once the middle school goes away, it appears that this other facility would turn into a teaching facility. And that 1,000-foot buffer would remain. But even if that 1,000-foot buffer went away, if you look at the purple figure 8, I mean, that pretty much covers all but one industrial lot at the south. And maybe 3 industrial lots near the north, of which currently houses reside on all of them, and one of them is owned by the railroad, and they've already indicated they're not selling that property or doing anything with it. So I think we'd be okay.
So you keep the purple, but you.
You would eliminate all the green circles.
Yes.
But and the way that would translate into the code is you would if you look at psilocybin, you would basically cross out 2.307.03 alpha 2 and alpha. I'm sorry, alpha 3. Just alpha 3 would go away. The private, public and private schools would still be in place based off of the Oregon state law. It would just be that last one of other locations where children congregate. That one would go away both for marijuana and psilocybin or just psilocybin. But that would eliminate those green circles. Yeah.
Mike,
Yes, ma'am.
when Canabros first came in for a pre-application conference, I remember we did a little bit of digging about the statewide pot of marijuana tax revenue. And our understanding was if we prohibited marijuana retail in city limits, that the city would receive $0 from that statewide pot. So I guess the question is, depending upon our language again about grandfathering and transferability of that, if the city is forfeiting that pot of money, I don't know what it works out to be on an annual basis, but we want to make sure we get that right too, if that's an interest to the city.
So yes, if we establish these rules in such a way that if Canterbury were to leave, that would be eliminated based off the green circle, the city would lose approximately I think it's $3,000 to $7,000 a year in state tax revenue that is shared to us from off of marijuana taxes. So that would go away. That would be a shortfall in the budget. It does not seem significant, but when we're so tight on our budget every year, $3,000 to $7,000 is a significant chunk of change that we can do things with. So losing that money is not as significant. On psilocybin, currently there's no indication that there will be a revenue tax sharing setup anywhere in the state. It's not established that way. However, talking with members of the LOC, which is the League of Oregon Cities, it's our lobbying group. There is a push potentially over the next couple of years to set up some sort of arrangement where taxing revenue could be shared with the communities that do it, but that isn't in the law or the rules or any of the requirements currently. There's not even a projection of what we would get. I don't even know. I'm not even counting on that happening. So yes, Holly's right. We could lose tax money, which is small but not insignificant. But right now, there would be no tax burden upon us if we for psilocybin, so. Something to be clear, hopefully that makes sense to this. So, again, my recommendation would be just leave it with the schools, but we've included it in there, based off of guidance from the US commissioners. My concern personally, as the city administrator, would be in implementing the buffers around so much of the city that it makes it is a backdoor prohibition. We very likely would get challenged in a court on this if somebody was that determined, and in losing that, we would pay a lot of money for that process, for that loss. And that could be quite significant to the city. Would it happen? I don't know. But as we've all seen in the recent political dynamics, there are people willing to press the test just to see what they can do and get away with. And somebody willing to challenge us on our prohibitions may be out there, who knows? But I can't predict that.
I agree. The probably not worth this one. Property. Always as well.
So it's basically, we don't have to make any decisions tonight, it's more guidance, what you want to see. If you're good with this, we can polish it up, represent it. If you want me to take that language or verbiage out, we can do that as well. Since there's some differing opinions just out of the four of you, so that's a work session.
I mean, I would
Just for the sake of fairness, because I'm a little biased in one aspect, but I've met her before. Really, she's been at some of the council meetings. She has expressed her concern, but I don't know if you want to hear what her thoughts are as a concerned citizen. It's not. It is a work session. It's really up to you, sir, if you want to, but. She's been patient and sitting here, so I don't know if you want to.
If you took the time to come, we wanted to use it.
Okay, my name is Lillian Engel. I live on 209 Southeast Rise. It was a little bit of a surprise to me when I got the weekly or the monthly newsletter with my water and sewer bill. It said Canterbury was going in down the street from me. And so I contacted Mike and he explained the process that they had to go through. And so I understood it was a city process that had to be involved with the psilocybin. I don't want to be left on the sidelines, which is why I've been coming. I did a little bit of research into it, and I agree that under therapeutic use, it could be helpful. But the way the law is written, it's not doctors or clinicians even that are in these service centers. It's high school graduates that have done 160 hours of training. That concerns me. I looked at the voting from Yamhill County for the state measure, and the yeses were only 600 votes, or no, it was 300 votes out of the no's for this measure. So Yamhill County is not Oklahoma County, and Amity is not Portland or Tiger. And I was looking at the results from the neighboring cities on the ban of psilocybin in their communities. And I don't know if they're outright bans because they said Amity ban, and I knew it was just a delay. So the other cities may be asking for a delay as well. I don't know that for sure, but all of the cities in Yamhill County had it on their ballot, and it was overwhelmingly being either banned or delayed. I don't know exactly the wording of their measures, and Mike might, but so if we are left as the only city in Yamhill County that has a psilocybin service center, then this is where they're going to come for that. And I really don't care if the city gets money for that or not. I just don't. I think it needs to be under therapeutic guidance of an actual psychiatrist or psychologist or a doctor. And you know, that's just my opinion on it. I do plan on trying to convince the council to put it on the ballot. 2024. I think it's important that the citizens of the Amity, aside from whatever Yamhill County decided, aside from whatever the state of Oregon decided, to decide what they would like to have be their neighbor. So that's my.
She is correct that overwhelmingly the neighboring cities have had their ballot measures passed. Out of those cities, I think it was 6 in total. McMinnville, basically, I think they're just allowing it to happen. They're gonna just be like, we're not even bothering with this. I don't recall which city it is, but there is one city that had an outright prohibition that went on the ballot measure and that appeared to pass. The other remaining cities, which I believe included Dayton, Carlton, Yamhill, us, I believe Willamina, and one, all basically had 2-year moratoriums, and all those 2-year moratoriums passed. I can't confirm whether there were sunset clauses or whatever, but each one of those cities with the moratorium would be in the same position as we are come to 2024. If they wanted to ban it, they would have to go back to their voters and try it again. So that's where those are. But she is correct. Every one of those moratoriums, one with, I believe, on average, about a 60-40 split, if not more. Some I think were as high as 70. But yes, she's correct. They were those bans and or moratoriums were passed.
Mike, I think it's worth mentioning that ahead of this election cycle, the League of Cities.
You're breaking up, Holly.
Can you hear me okay?
A little better now. You were breaking
Okay.
up there.
I think it's worth mentioning that leading up to this election, the League of Oregon Cities reached out to all of their city members and helped them prepare for this. I think generally it was acknowledged that no city was prepared with their codes in place to deal with the time, place, and manner. And so that's why the template language was provided for all these moratoriums. So most cities use the same kind of template language that the League of Oregon Cities had prepared for them, just to buy themselves a little more time to prepare for this, to see how it would be rolled out by OHA.
Oh, if it doesn't get on the ballot, can the planning commission and the city council then adopt time, place, and manner?
You wouldn't have enough time between the 2024 election date and the sunset of the moratorium to go through the entire public hearing procedures.
What's the,
Code
what, does that include the deadline for, in other words, if you back it up for the deadline for filing?
What do you think, Mike?
You know, the deadline for putting it on the ballot, how, I mean, I should know this, but in terms of how far, how
That's
much
what
time would
Right.
we need? You know,
So the
Right.
put it on ballot would be, it's about 90 days to get it on the ballot. So, and the deadline to put it in the ballot is, I believe,
Isn't it August 8th?
I think it was August, so. So that's, so we'd have to have it in place, probably, we'd have to have it ready to go. The ballot measure all drafted, approved by council, the adjoining ordinances, all approved, ready to go by August of 2024. So that it could be appropriately entered into the county clerk and state elections office for the November election.
So maybe the timing is off, but how much of a gap would it be if we knew that it wasn't going to go on the ballot? And the planning commission immediately sent a recommendation to the city council. How much of a gap would there be?
We could do that between August and December.
I'm just throwing that out as an idea.
Yeah. So the dates to keep in mind are we need a a public hearing by the planning commission, and then a public hearing by the city council, and then an ordinance. So there's 3 months right there essentially. And then before that first public hearing, you need a 35-day notice to the state. So 4 months. You could get it done.
So we probably have a gap of about a month between, okay.
Again, I mentioned, so right now, the composition of the city council will change as of January of this year, so the opportunities, and that's why I can't predict what's going to happen, the opportunities for what may or may not transpire with the council in 2024, based off of our recent history of turnover and churn on the city council dais. You may or may, I'd say it's a coin toss as to whether you get a city council that would want to do that or not, and put it to the ballot in 2024. For that reason, Mayor King and the current city council wanted to start this process now, and all of you get it up to them, and put it in place now, so it's more or less, I'm using a lot of, I'm sorry, a lot of basically fire and forget it, just get it done. So even if we took no further action, we would have the time, means in place, restrictions established. So it's
I would support something that is not going to get us sued or has a potential to get us sued.
I said, so right now, what I've drafted and what we presented is basically off of your guidance for what you wanted to see and what you wanted to present. I can revise it if you so choose and present it again in December or January, however you choose to go forward with this.
I would agree with you. We don't want to put ourselves up with lawsuit. It doesn't matter what you're doing for, it's sued whatever. So,
and that is, you know, the change, the risk you take. So if you choose to go down, that being said, if you choose to go down this road and leave these in, there's nothing to state that the city council won't rule you and pull those out before it gets approved in their public hearing and their decision-making process. They may, since we'll have potentially three new members on the council come January, that may sway the vote in such a way that they're willing to risk the lawsuit. I honestly do not know. So again, it comes down to you want to keep it in there or take it out, and you gambling thing, you want to roll the bones and take your chances, or do you want to fix it? I'm giving you both sides, and I'm talking on both sides of my mouth. That's kind of what I'm supposed to do. It's really up to you to determine which way you'd like to go forward with this.
If we don't, the potential for rescinding. Correct?
So in 2024, if we do not go to the ballot, the moratorium sunsets 1 January 2025. You can open up a business with psilocybin in this thing. As Holly correctly pointed out, even if we did nothing right now, that would just be one property, which is currently occupied by campers. So what you're truly taking the risk upon is what could change in 2 years' time as far as zoning, properties, the school, city council, et cetera, that could potentially open up more properties to psilocybin operations or marijuana operations for that matter, come 2025, if the ballot measure, if there is no second ballot measure. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay.
But if it is to have it, all you're right now. That's my simple thinking. You know, it's all like taking it out.
Again, I don't know what.
Okay, so to me, it'd be no question. If people finish it, yes, then that's where we are. They say now, then it's done.
It's done. The prohibition would kill this in its bed, but I think the other, again, the other side of it is, let's say in 2024, we go to the ballot. We want to put a moratorium, I'm sorry, we want to put a full ban prohibition period end dot on psilocybin. And it fails, and there are no rules in place already, as we just talked with Director Savage. We wouldn't be able to run out the clock, and having 2 years of lead time, I'm sure there'd be somebody that would come in January 1st, 2025 and said, I'm good to go, I want to start a business, and we would be out of luck. Again, that's the flip side of the risk. I think she has a good point, in that based off of historical voting data, how this county votes, the likelihood of it failing low, but it's not statistically zero either. So,
But if it does.
and you have
I
no
think that's
rules
the
in
point
place.
that he's made, is that that's what the people want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now we. I mean, they voted for this. But they're not.
So, I guess that what I'm hearing from you, and what I guess the other option is to do nothing, kick the can down the road, see what happens in 2024, and try and convince a future city council, and I'm not sure who will be still on the dais, a future planning commission to convince the future city council that we want to put this a full outright prohibition and ban on the ballot in November of 2024 and take our chances. That's kind of the guidance I'm getting from you, is that you're willing to just go that path. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I think we should just leave the language in place, except take out the additional buffers. With one thing else, that's following the state guide.
Yes.
Right. Got one property.
Correct.
That's a pretty low risk comparison to opening ourselves up to pursue.
And then still push in 2024 for outright ban, which I'm sure you will be leading that charge. There will be community members leading that to get that on the ballot as a full outright ban in 2024, but at least we have the rules in place.
And we got the rules in place. That's a, that's what they want to put it to the vote.
That's correct, yes.
And decide what they want.
Correct.
So we would have this map minus the green.
That is correct, yes. All the green circles would disappear. And that would be for psilocybin right now. And I can also take it off. I'm sorry, I grew marijuana, so I can present to you basically a cleaned up version of you requested.
The marijuana, there's no language in the state. Whatever, about marijuana. Zoning. If there is about some side of it, says, hey, you can't have a back.
That's correct. So marijuana, we can prohibit it, but we lose tax revenue. So, but we've gone above and beyond, because we basically the one place that they could put it. We got it, we're getting the revenue, everyone seems to be relatively copacetic about that. Relatively.
So I guess my question, if we leave the buffer, the additional buffer is in place for marijuana. And not open ourselves up to any liability.
As long as we keep the grandfather in for what's there, yes, we can do that. Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah. We'll have to really look at that grandfathering transferability with the city attorney to make sure we get that right.
So the guidance I have is take out the language. Clean it up a little bit. Represent it to you at a future city council meeting for potential final vote to go to council. Good. All right.
Mike, quick comment. When we kind of laid out our schedule for this legislative amendment, we had a sense of urgency to move quickly. Now that we have confidence the 2-year moratorium gives us some time, it doesn't our next step was a proposed joint work session between the planning commission and the city council, so that it wasn't so siloed with the planning commission just delivering a decision and have a nice day. There actually could be some dialogue and some discussion between the two bodies. It doesn't make a lot of sense to do that before you have your new members sitting. So I wonder if we can push out our timeline a little bit and do a joint work session maybe in January or February in the new year.
I'm good with that. That'll work.
Yeah, I don't get anybody on the city council. I'm not too big on meeting people, but I would probably bigger than know. Okay, anything else for good of the order? I mean, we can move to adjourn, we are adjourned at 8:21.
Good night, all.
Thank
Thank you.
That's fair. About whether those were balance or just. It sounds like they're gonna be-
One of the cities had an outlet there. I think it was. I don't know. But the, it was the one that we-
And then, give it to Louise. So she was talking about. There was some kind of.
What you're saying, there's a group called the League of United Cities. It's a coalition. Other resources, other staffing.
Did you hear that?
They have the permits and basically have another pair of boilerplate. Stuff like that. They get vetted by all their different staff and bring staff.
Oh,
They came out,
I really did this.
referring to, they came out for one, this election. They gave here's a boilerplate process for a moratorium. Here's a boilerplate process.
Yeah.
And it was basically, you can pick one. We took the moratorium, and then if you want that thing here, just kind of follow this guideline. And that's what we do. I think that's what the was using.
Yeah.
So, all that said, in conclusion, we already have a template for a ban, unless something changes in 2 years, so we're probably ban that template out. Just follow that guidebook, unless 2 years from now, something changes in the LOC. We want to try this, this is the new boilerplate. There's also a wild target. 2 years.
Okay, I'll-
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
you're good.
Right, so. And it's just a few years.
And I understand.
But-
Well, how would? Do you get any kind of thing to notice on that, and maybe you have a special election to get under the radar?
So the state law currently states that we have to hold the election on.
Even.
So a special election that was held like. You would not. But what I'm saying is, let's just say in 2023, the new state legislature sits, the new governors in there, and they basically say, we're gonna pass a law that amends. Basically, side measure, now we're gonna change it, so instead of you. Whatever. Then we would have to react. Our moratorium would still be in place, it would still be effective, but it could change what we can do in 2023. That's the other, I didn't get to that, so that would be the other future gambles. Like a state legislature in 2023, if it puts it the wrong section, whatever they do. Monkey with it, they come up with a different set of rules by 2024. That changes the game on all of us collectively, so. Whether that's gonna happen or not, I don't know, we might get some indication of that, I'm sure if they tried to do that, you would probably hear about it in. Every news media outlet in the state, somebody would call. There would probably be a lot of folks like you on that are passionate about this subject on both sides. That would probably start sending up the search, the rocket flares and rallying the troops and everything to advocate for whatever change might come, but. We'll see what happens in the, right now, it's just our ballot measure is passed. You too.
Do you need locking them up or we do that?
I will do all that when I go home, and I hope I will see you maybe Wednesday. Don't come in tomorrow like that, because you need to sleep.
Question for you, if I was gonna reach out to the mayor, just to chat about economic development in the city, is that something that you would want to be? I'm just gonna have one thought with it. I wanted to include you in the.
Actually, believe it or not, the person on the food is John Pike, who is also he's our council responsible for community.
How do I get a hold of her?
I will email to the three of you and set up the meeting.
Perfect.
Well, let me phrase it. I will set up the introductions. You will figure out the meetings. I will-
Yeah, and that's something you would want to,
I may or may, depending on when you all set it up, I may or may not attend.
okay,
Uh,
I wouldn't want to exclude you, I think.
No, but honestly, I mean, I know it seems like I run everything around here, but and it's not that case. If you have a good conversation, and they say, Mike, will do this, I will do it. I'm not gonna, I don't want to be the person setting policy.
Oh, no, I understand.
So if you want to have a good coffee with them, I would not feel excluded slightly or otherwise.
Okay, if you could do that email, that would
I
be
will do
great.
that email tomorrow for you guys to just do the introduction and state that you would like to meet with them.
Yeah, chat about economic development in the city. Perfect. Thanks. This was a good discussion, by the way. I thought.
Did I make sense? I mean, it just.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
It's,
Absolutely.
I have it all right in my head. Sometimes it's hard to get it out.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I
I mean, listen, a lawsuit against the city of Amity would be devastating to, to the finances.